Committee for UCPS. Today is April 26th and it is 9:03. I call this meeting to order, starting with the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Committee for UCPS. Today is April 26th. Don't know what that was, but we will take that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next is approval of open session minutes from March 15th.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Brings us to policies for second review, starting with policy 1-24.
Okay, 1-24 came to the policy committee last month and to the board for first review at the April meeting. There have been no input from stakeholders, and staff is requesting that this go for approval at the May 3rd meeting.
Do we have any questions?
No.
And we'll wait to the end of all these policies and we'll send these up at one time. So that moves us to B, policy 132.
Sorry, this policy also came to the committee last month and to the board at the April meeting. I did receive one email from a stakeholder group with some questions about the revisions shortly after the policy committee meeting. I responded to those questions and I've not received any further input from that group or from any other stakeholder group. And so staff would request that this go for approval at the May 3rd meeting.
Any other questions on 132?
None.
Move to policy 2-4, grants and funding for special projects.
Okay, like the others, this came to the policy committee last month and to the board for first review. The April meeting, there's been no input from any stakeholder group, and staff is requesting that this go for approval at the May 3rd meeting.
Any questions, comments on 2-4?
No.
Takes us policy 3-2E.
Okay, this one came to policy committee last month and to the board in April for first review. There's been no input from any stakeholder group, and staff would request that this go for approval at the May 3rd meeting.
Any comments?
None.
Policy 3-3.
Okay, like the others, this came to policy last month and to the board for first review in April. There's been no input from any stakeholder group, and staff would ask that this go for approval at the May 3rd meeting.
Any comments, concerns? Michelle, back to policy 132. Do you feel like we gave it ample time for a response from that stakeholder?
Yeah, it was right after the last policy committee meeting, so they've had a month, and it was a stakeholder group that's very responsive, so I'm not concerned.
Okay. Very good. Having said, I will look for a motion to send policy 124, policy 132, policy 24, policy 3-2E, and policy 3-3 to the full board. Our next meeting is going to be June for second review.
May.
We're actually not having, we're skipping
No, we're not
the May
having May.
meeting
We're skipping.
because I'm out of the country in May, so we were going to skip the May meeting.
We're not having a May meeting at all?
At this point, because I'm out from the 17th on, and so we could do it in the very beginning of June before the June board meeting, but we know for sure the next one is June 23rd. We can look for another.
So no meeting on May 3rd?
No board meeting on May 3rd. I thought you meant I think he means no policy committee meeting in May.
Right.
Okay. Sorry.
Sorry.
No, it's my confusion. Sorry.
So moved. Second.
Have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Policies for first review. First policy up is policy 3-2 or 3-4. I'm sorry.
Yeah, 3-4 communicable diseases. These revisions are based upon changes. If I were to look at them, expanding communicable disease to cover things like COVID, and they're recommended by the School Boards Association. Our lead nurses have reviewed them. and made some tweaks to the policy. And we would request that this go for review at the May 3rd meeting.
Any comments on 3-4? Next
No.
policy
policy up is 4-12.
Okay. When I was reviewing 3-4 communicable diseases, this is the companion policy for that policy. So we went through and kind of made revisions that were consistent with the revisions to that policy, and then also made some revisions that were part of the proposed School Boards Association policies that we did not have in our current policy. As with the other policy, the lead nurses have reviewed this, made some tweaks, and staff would ask that this go for review at the May 3rd meeting.
Can you talk to the first paragraph, the additions to it? What does that mean? Decisions regarding the educational status of students with communicable diseases will be made on a case-by-case basis in accordance. What does that mean? Are you talking about?
The location and the delivery method, there may be some ways that we can do virtual, some where we need to do homebound, some where we can, do a hybrid or some partial in the building. We're gonna have to look at the individual needs of the students and the communicable disease and the spread. And we have to look with the health department and work through that.
So if somebody has the flu, we have to.
No, because that doesn't fit under the communicable diseases. They're defined, and HIV and AIDS were the primary ones when these policies were originally written, and they are established by the health department, and the flu has never been within those.
But the definition is just an infectious agent.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's never been, the flu and a regular cold and those things have never been considered under the communicable disease policy.
Well, that's good, but the definition is not great.
Right. And I don't know, maybe the flu is not considered an infectious agent. I'd have to do
Michelle, would it help if you put in parentheses or bullets examples like HIV, AIDS, and what the intent is, so that people can have a better idea that it's not, the flu?
Sure, I can add some examples.
I don't know, maybe that would help.
Yeah, I can talk to the school nurses about that.
Okay.
I wouldn't try and do it myself.
Because if the state board or nurses or the local health director wrote this for a specific intent, if it's written towards a specific intent like HIV and AIDS, then let's list what this was written for, so that a parent doesn't think an earache or something is not part of that category.
I think this was written for COVID.
The policy, the policy was
The
originally written.
changes have COVID all over it.
I don't disagree. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, because the policy was initially written for HIV and AIDS, but then it was expanded.
Right, no, I know.
Yeah.
Ms. Morris, is there a list of these diseases that can be emailed to me, so I'll what they would consider?
I don't know. I'm gonna have to talk to the school nurses.
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Yeah.
So communicable diseases would be like chicken pox, shingles, hepatitis B, C, HIV, AIDS, influenza, mumps. COVID isn't even on this list, but it seems clear to me that this was probably written for COVID. This list does include COVID, Ebola.
Okay.
So I think it would help for the State Board Association or someone to share with us why they're recommending this to all boards, and just put it on paper.
Okay. I'll talk to our school nurses about some examples.
On the second page, under D, D1, sorry, it should be reportable diseases or conditions from the defined term.
Oh, instead of and conditions, gotcha.
Correct.
Okay.
I don't have any other comments on this.
Everybody else good?
Good.
A lot of the stuff is you just labeled the parts of the policy, so that's
It's just
easy to read.
organizational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hate when they're all
Next
just
brings us,
one loud paragraph.
Yeah. Thank you.
next brings us policy 419.
Yes, this one is recently approved, but we had a situation, a concern that was raised by a member of the public. And so the part in red is clarification recommended, that I proposed to clear up the question. And I reached out to all the districts in the state to say, how do you determine what is the geographical area served by the district? And universally, all districts responded, said they use the street address. So there are properties that have some portion of their property in Union County. The street address is in Mecklenburg, Stanley, Anson, Cabarrus, whatever. And so, and this came from one of those such people whose part of their property is in Union, but the street address is Mecklenburg. And so the request from this stakeholder was in the blue that they would like the board to consider that if the domicile is partially in the county, but the street address is in another county, that they would be able to enroll in the district with the payment of tuition. And then we would require they be released from the other county's school district. So I did share that I would bring this request to the board. The part in red, staff would definitely ask that that go to the board for first review at the next meeting. The blue is up to the board for discussion as to how you want to proceed on this request.
So apparently we have one. Are you aware of any others that would fit this category?
We have a lot of neighborhoods that have some portion that's in Mecklenburg, some portion that's in Union. Those are the ones I'm most familiar with, and where the line actually cuts through people's property.
There's a lot in my area.
Yeah, and this one is in your area, and this particular residence, the line cuts right through their house.
Oh gosh. Okay.
But their street address, and when you look at the real estate listings and all of that, it's a Mecklenburg County school. When I called my similar situated person in Mecklenburg County, it was a Mecklenburg County address when I reached out to student placement over there. So, and they consider it their residence. And so this would allow folks who are in that kind of situation to come to Union if they want to. They'd have to pay tuition because they are technically another county student. And I did talk to other colleagues across the state, and some of them do allow this type of transfer with the payment of tuition.
Do we have any idea how many houses we're talking about?
I don't, because they come piecemeal. I know several years ago, we had one out in the Weddington area, in a former board member's neighborhood where it was split. We have this one, which is out in Mrs. Merrill's area, in the Stallings area. Just periodically they come up, and I think sometimes they misunderstand their realtors and think they're gonna, what I've been told several times is that the realtor said they'd be able to pick school districts. And I tell them, I'm sorry, that's not accurate. But this is a way to address that. It would allow some students to come, but it would also address the fact that they're not truly a Union County per se address student, and would allow for the payment of tuition if they really want to come to the district. Staff doesn't have any recommendation per se, but doesn't have any objection to moving in this direction. Dr. Houlihan, am I correct when I say that?
How much is tuition?
It is, I can't remember the exact figure, but it's in the neighborhood of $13 a day.
So I think local taxes per student is around $2,500. And Shauna could help us with, because of the charter school payments. But I don't know what $13 per day would total for a school year. But it seems like their bill would be equivalent. I don't know.
Yeah, Shauna figured this amount out. It is the per pupil amount for students.
Okay. So per pupil is somewhere under 3,000, I think.
Yeah, this is what that amount comes out to.
Okay.
We had for years had a very low amount, and Shauna came to me about a year ago and said, it costs us about twice what you're charging. And so we had her recalculate. That was about the time I took over student assignment.
Okay, because $13 a day would actually be less than what, but then Shauna could clarify, but $13 a day would be around $2,300.
Yeah, and I may be slightly off, but it was somewhere in that neighborhood.
Okay. And I don't know what family you're referring to, but people that I've spoken to in the past, their home was actually in Union County and they paid Union County taxes, but their mailbox where their address was sitting in Mecklenburg County. And so their kids were having to go to Mecklenburg County, but their home and what they paid taxes on was Union County. So if they're paying taxes for their property in Union County, it seems like they would be able to go to Union County schools if they're paying taxes.
I think with most of these, there's a split. They pay taxes in both counties.
In both, okay.
And the particular family that brought up to me, my understanding, I asked for clarification from their lawyer about whether they actually paid Union County taxes.
Okay.
And it appeared like they paid Stallings taxes, but not necessarily Union County taxes. But he didn't get back to me on that. And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But I think that a lot of the people that I've talked to when this has come up have paid some in Mecklenburg, some in Union.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Well, I'm good with it because I don't think this is a huge number of people. I think it's very rare, but there are neighborhoods along the 485 corridor that might fall into Mecklenburg or Union, and again along 218. So I don't think that we're talking about a significant number of students that would overcrowd our schools or anything, and especially if they're willing to pay. I think it's the fair thing to do.
I agree. Anything else on 419? All right, takes us a new proposed policy, federal grant administration.
Yes, under prior DPI audits, we've had to kind of compile multiple policies to address their audit requirements. And so this policy is being proposed to put all of those requirements for federal grants in one location and one policy. It's been reviewed by the finance team, and they've made some recommended changes which have been added to this policy. Staff would ask that this go for review at the May 3rd meeting.
The one request that I have about federal grants, and we can talk to the board about it, but I would like for administration, before they enter into a complex, long application fee or application period, to bring that federal grant to the full board for approval or consideration, and then let the board decide if we move forward. Because I have a lot of concerns about federal grants. And from my experience, the board never hears about it until after we received it. And so my request would be that before staff spent months and hundreds of hours on an application process with a federal grant, I think they should have to come in curriculum or whatever committee that the grant would apply towards. I think staff needs to bring that federal grant to committee and let the board decide if we want that money or not. And I'm referring specifically to the required professional development once we accept that money. Because I think there's federal professional development that is required by our teachers and staff and employees. They're required to take this professional development if we take the money. So I would like for the board to consider my request that staff bring the federal grant to whichever committee to vet it and decide if we really want to take that money or not, and what are the requirements if we do take the money.
And I'll look through the policy manual to see if this policy seems to basically apply once you've gotten the grant. I'll look at our policies to see where a good place for such language would be.
I've gotten a lot of complaints over the last 18 months from teachers that had to go take professional development that they did not feel comfortable being forced to take.
And I would say too, from a finance perspective, when we do the federal grants, we hire people because we're required to under the grant, but then what happens at the end of the grant? And that's when we have to deal with it. So I agree with you.
Yeah, maybe the finance department is the finance committee is the right committee to send this through. That's a good idea. But I think the board, especially if the board chair has to sign off on the application and receipt of the money. I know I've had to sign off over the years for a lot of grants. And I really think the board needs to have more information before the chair's asked to sign something they know nothing about.
I was just looking, we had the in the policies for second review, grants and funding for special projects. And I don't know if I'll look to see if there's some language that we can look at.
Thank you, Michelle. Maybe we could partner those and work on those together.
Yep.
Other than that, I'm glad this is just first review. Because I think we need to look at this very closely before we start taking money.
With that, Michelle, do we want to bring policy 3.4 and 4.12 and this new policy back to this committee prior to sending it to the full board?
Policy 2.4 is the grants and fundings for special projects. And it's a pretty short policy. I can add language that, if you look back at 2.4, the second sentence says the superintendent will seek public and private grants and funding for special projects as a source of supplemental funding. We could, if the board would like, we could add language there that says prior to applying for such a grant, a committee of the Board of Education will review.
And send to the full board. If the committee approves or whatever, our committee process.
I can say prior to applying for such a grant, the grant, or how about the funding opportunity?
Or the superintendent must present to,
Yeah, the funding opportunity will be presented to a board committee.
and if approved, will be taken to the full board for consideration. In order to proceed to the application process. I mean, something along those lines.
Prior to applying for such a grant, the funding opportunity will be presented to a board committee, and upon recommendation, the committee will be reviewed by the board.
I like that very much. Thank you. How did the other board members, any
I
input?
think sounds good.
Good.
And that could be put in the other one, right?
The
Two,
other
four,
one
right.
deals with once we've received the grant. So this would
Okay.
be, this is when you're the 2-4 is when you're looking at grants. And then the proposed new policy is once you get them. So
So the new
So
policy would
what-
stay the same.
the new policy would stay the same. 2-4 would say that prior to applying for such a grant, the funding opportunity will be presented to a board committee, and upon recommendation by the committee will be reviewed by the board. That way you catch it at the front end.
Mhm. Well, I want to make sure we catch it on the back end too, Michelle. So for anything that we do, receive, before we accept it, I think it should come back to the committee and the full board before we take the money. It's just my recommendation.
And I can cross-reference 2-4 in this proposed new policy so that it,
Yeah, that would be good. Cross-reference it. But the board needs to be aware of these federal grants. Because mandatory professional development from the federal level doesn't always align with Union County. And it just seems like I've had more complaints in the last 12 to 18 months. I've had a lot of teachers tell me they had to sit in professional development that made them very uncomfortable.
in the cross-references section at the bottom of the proposed new policy, I'm adding policy 2-4.
That works. It's a good start.
Thank you.
All right, going back to policies for first review. Michelle, is it your recommendation to send 3-4 and 4-12 to the full board with your changes, or do we want to bring those back to this committee first?
It's up to the committee. Generally, we have made changes at the second review before and just sent them to the full board for approval.
Okay,
But it's up to the committee.
I would say now that we've met, because we've made these changes, she can put it in blue if she wants to. And we can send it to the full board for the May meeting.
okay. All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion to send policy 3-4, 4-12 with the changes, policy 4-19, and the new proposed policy to the full board for first review in May.
So
So,
moved.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next brings us to administrative guidelines, policy 4-3.
Yes, this is the Code of Student Conduct, and it is time for the review of the Code of Student Conduct. The most significant kind of substantive changes have been initially in the sexual harassment rule, and those are to comply with the changes to Title IX that we've already made in board policy. There's been a couple other additions that have been brought out by school level staff. One of those is using cell phones to video fights on campus, posting them to social media, using phones to bully other students by videoing during school. And so since the policy has clear under the electronic rules or the electronic devices rule, specific criteria as to when you should be using your phone in school, this would be considered a violation of that. And we have clarified that doing that is a violation of that rule. And then go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
And then the other significant change is in the vaping, tobacco, THC, all of those kind of behaviors that have ramped up since we did this last 2 years ago.
So I brought this up last year as well. Possession and use of electronic devices, which is cell phones. So we have a policy that says that they can't use it during instructional time. They do all the time. So I would say at least 60% of our student population is going against our policy. So why are we doing it?
And my understanding, and I could be wrong, and Dr. Lynn, I don't mean to, is that the policy allows for it during an authorized purpose or where a staff member says it's okay. Students will not use cell phones during instruction except pursuant to an authorized purpose or as an instructional tool under the guidance and direction of a staff member during a school activity. I don't know if they're allowing students to use them outside of that kind of criteria. And Dr. Lynn, I don't know if I'm missing something. Not being in a school, I just don't know well enough.
No, I don't think you're missing anything. I mean, I think kids are on phones all the time. I mean, it happens. It's a fact of life. And I think that where you have really good instruction happening, sometimes you have teachers that allow kids to use it for instructional purposes or to listen to an iPod or a podcast or to do research. And that's kind of, part of it. But I think what I hear Michelle saying is part of this policy is to address the issues surrounding the videoing of certain things that we believe are inappropriate, and then using those videos to promote on social media and those kinds of things, which the Code of Conduct has never addressed.
And I agree with that, but that's not what I was talking about. Our students use their phones all the time. They can listen to music, they can listen, but I don't think it should be a violation of the Code of Student Conduct.
I think we just need to clarify, if I'm hearing everything correct, it's the posting to social media. It's kind of like, it reminds me, like if kids take pictures or inappropriate pictures and then share it, then they can be charged with distributing those pictures.
And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the first sentence only.
Okay, what page? On first page?
10.
No, it's
Page
10.
10
10.
10.
Okay.
10.
Do we want
using that as an example, Kathy. Maybe it was a poor example, but I think the problem is when they use their phone and then post it to social media, like fights and bullying.
Well, and I agree with that as well. But like Ms. Heintel has said, it's one of those, we encourage integrity. We encourage students to do the right thing as well as adults, but to use, they have their phones, as you mentioned, to listen to music and things of that nature. I don't believe it would be fair for the school as a whole to ban, because there are students who are lacking integrity and morals, because cell phones are very useful. If someone may get sick or something they need to share with their parents. I mean, I get it. People, it's social media and they use it for positive and negative things. But to just put it all to say that no phones, I think it's kind of crazy in the time that we're living in.
And I would agree. I think Kathy, and I agree with Kathy. I think the first sentence is the problem, where it basically it says kids can't use cell phones. And if we took that out and just started with what we
The prohibited uses.
would
I
that
agree
not-
with that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think that's the solution.
So what does that look like?
Well, basically, it just takes out the part saying students cannot use cell phones, because I think we're beyond that point.
Yeah,
That's what
because
I'm
what
saying.
we're
So the
addressing
first
are the
sentence would get
prohibited
struck.
uses.
Yeah, I can take that language out.
Because what we're trying to do, so really, we just want to pick up at the prohibited uses of cell phones.
And I just caught there was a typo there. It says prohibited uses use. So I'm taking the second one. Okay, I've struck that first sentence.
Perfect.
Anything else on code of conduct?
No.
Moves us to policy 5-6, non-service animals in the classroom.
Oh, wait. I'm sorry. I have one more.
Okay,
I'm sorry, Todd.
you're fine.
On page 20 of 24. It starts on 20 or 19, I guess. Why did we make this change and got rid of the 1 through 5? It's a
It's the one-
sexual harassment thing.
Yeah, the 1 through 5 don't meet the federal definition any longer.
Okay.
So, and I will tell you, I referred it to the other board policy as opposed to, I initially cut and pasted the language. Am I frozen? I look like I'm frozen on my
No,
screen.
you are frozen,
Okay.
but we can hear you.
Okay. When I initially cut and pasted the language from the federal law into the policy, this is a document that goes out to students and students are expected to read. And some of the language that's in the federal regulations and is in the other board policy, I did not, and staff did not feel was appropriate for students necessarily to be reading in the language that it was. So
Okay.
we referred it to the other policy, and it's just to comply with federal changes to the federal regs.
Okay. So the first part is an employee, and then the second bullet, the unwelcome conduct, is both employees, students, staff members, anybody?
Mhm.
Okay.
So why does it have, I mean, maybe I'm not understanding. Why can we not keep the 1 through 5 just so that people can have some idea of the context?
We
Does
can,
it-
it's just not consistent any longer, and it's
Okay.
much broader than that, but we can.
Okay. I just wanted to understand the change.
Yeah, it's due to the Title IX regulation changes.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes students need to be told, examples of, what could get them into trouble. So I don't know.
Well, and that's why we have the links in the policy to
Yeah.
where the more
Yes.
clear definitions are. And in addition, we are working right now on training, enhanced training for all grade levels on Title IX and the Title IX changes and
Good.
what's expected of students.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
So I guess I need a motion to policy or administrative guidelines 4.3 and 5.6 to full board.
Oh, wait,
I don't know-
I have a question. Wait, I'm sorry.
Okay.
5.6, I have a question.
Yeah.
Sitting here.
I'm sorry, we didn't go to 5.6 yet. I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry,
We went there, but we came back. So now we're
Okay.
back again.
sorry.
Yeah, the revision to 5.6 was recommended by Mr. Davis, the CTE director, to comply with what we're actually planning on the expansions we're planning and currently engaged in.
Yeah, it's the same language in the
It
high
is.
school one, but for middle school now that we have CTE programs. But on page 2, 3, the high school animals in classrooms, it says that live animal study at the high school should be completed by virtual. But then the next paragraph says that that if the curriculum requiring the use of small animals, so which is it? Do they have to be virtual, or they can have animals?
I don't know.
I don't think virtual animals have to be appropriate, cared for, and secured to prevent.
I would
So
agree.
interesting,
Yeah.
in sixth grade, they can have lizards and crickets. So that makes sense for middle school. But then the high school, I don't understand it. I assume we don't have small animals or anything.
I don't know.
But it says requiring use of small animals, i.e. rabbits. But then above it says should be completed by virtual means.
And I think that sentence refers to the one above where it's talking about dissection. So I think that live animal study refers to the dissection, and maybe that's what's done virtual. I don't know.
I don't think so.
Okay, I'll follow up with Brian Davis on that.
Okay, thank you.
I know when we went to Monroe Middle School for the Health Sciences Academy, you know, they had preserved frogs that they were working on. But again, that was middle school, and this
That's
is high
dissection.
school.
Yeah, that's dissection. This means the question that I have is about live animals in the high
Live
school.
animals.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yep. That's all I had. Sorry.
All right, so now we'll look for a motion to send administrative guidelines 4.3 and 5.6 to the full board for review.
So
So
moved.
you.
Second. In favor, aye.
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 All right, so that brings us closing comments, actions taken to the full board. We're going to take policy for second review, 1-24, 1-32, policy 2-4, policy 3-2E, and policy 3-3. We're also going to take policies for first review to the board in May, policy 3-4, policy 4-12, policy 4-19, and the new proposed policy on federal grants. And also taking to the full board in May, administrative guidelines, policy 4-3 and 5-6.
Yes, sir.
Our next meeting is scheduled, as I mentioned earlier, for June. We're skipping May, June 21st at 8 o'clock, and that will remain via Zoom. If no one has anything else, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.